This is the World Innovators Podcast with your host, Donna Peterson.
I am so lucky today, and I know I'm using my little St. Patrick's Day pun in there, but I am sitting down with an international pioneer. She was doing international long before the internet came to be. She was on the B2B side, and I met her, I would say, around 1990. So her and I have been doing this a very long time, and it's going to be interesting to hear what she has to say about marketing today and marketing into the future. But before I get started, let me introduce myself. I am Donna Peterson, and you are listening to the World Innovators Podcast, where we are sitting down regularly with marketing executives, company business owners, and publishers talking about marketing trends, techniques, what's working, what's not. And then at the end, I always am going to ask what energizes them, because I strongly feel we need to energize in order to be innovative at work. So Cindy, I am sitting down with Cindy Cardinal of C&C Communications. She is the owner and founder. And welcome. So glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I mentioned, you and I have been doing the international for quite some time, long before a lot of other companies came into that market. And I'm curious, how did you get started in marketing, but also international marketing?
Well, I actually started in the media space. I worked for BPA for about a year and a half. It was not marketing enough for me. And then I started working for what was Intertech Publishing, and I had a couple international brands that I was marketing. And so that's kind of how Telephony International, and I think there was a couple others. So that's really how I got involved in the international space, was marketing to those, for those people.
I know I used Telephony International all the time because it was such a great source with distribution across several companies. And at the time, we have to remind people, those were postal lists.
All postal, international. Yeah. It's not like you could be phoning international, although there was a lot of domestic telemarketing back then, but no international, obviously.
Yeah, that was a big, is postal. And that's why it was so important to make sure you're using quality sources, because we all know in order to do a postal campaign, it's expensive.
Right.
So the Telephony International really was our gateway into reaching that specific industry. And that's, I think, how we met at, I think it was the Al Goodloe show.
Right.
That's what I think. Multinational show back in.
Yes.
Yeah. And that
back
was
in the 90s in New York. Yeah, I spoke at that. And I think that's where we met. I don't remember if we were speaking together or if we just met at the event, but that's where we met.
I know we used to exhibit there all the time because it would pull people from all over the world who were in also the B2B sector, which was very important for us at the time.
Well, and remember, it sounds crazy, there was no internet. So to find other people who marketed internationally, that was a great space to go and talk to people. And it's changed a lot since then, but it's come full circle in some ways too. So
yes, and that was a great show because it was small and you really got to know people. Because my mom started, when she started this company 40 years ago, it was all going there and visiting with publishers and conference companies to talk to them about their lists. But with Intertech, we were lucky because you were based here in the States.
Right.
And so that was nice, where Telephony had that, across all the countries, where we were going to meet with publishers that were overseas.
Yeah.
So it's interesting times. Now, one of the things we talked about the other day were people's house lists and their databases and the value in keeping them cleaned and updated. And I'm curious to hear what you're doing with some of your clients when it comes in regards to that.
Well, I think it's really important to keep your database clean. Your internal list is really where you're going to get hopefully the most bang for your buck in marketing. And even I was trying to find some stats after that conversation, and I looked back on something I put on my website that pre-COVID, lists were decaying at 20 to 25% a year. So I can imagine that that number is even higher now. I think that things that people are doing, I mean, to be honest, if you have a magazine or a media company, you almost have to do some of the updating if you're audited, or if you're not audited, or you mail periodicals, you're forced into doing some of that. But there's a lot of benefits to keeping the list clean. We are still doing telemarketing to clean up, as well as doing some email efforts. I'm working with people. I think this is a good time to kind of take a look at your database, take a look at some of those unengaged people. Can you re-engage them? If not, maybe it's time to get rid of them and add some new names to your database. Definitely been doing some database cleanup. And I think another thing that I'm seeing more of is people doing appends from different sources, trying to find different data points that maybe they're not asking. I think that's a little bit more what we're going to even see more of in the future, is things like business type, SIC code. I mean, that's an easy one, but employee size. To have more standardized data is to not ask the consumer, but to get that from some outside sources. So I think we're seeing more of that as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because, when they get a good handle on their house list, one, they can probably curtail their messages to a specific segment of the list, but it also starts to give them an idea of who is that ideal customer of theirs.
Right. Well, and I'm still seeing, I'm working with a couple of clients now, actually some not even in the media space, one's a manufacturing firm, and their data is still in a lot of silos. Marketing has a file, events has a file. This person has a file sitting in their closet, and they sometimes use that for marketing, and they sometimes push it to whatever source they're using. So it's still trying to get some of that data together. There's still a lot of, I think that's going to be the wave of the future, is more people putting their data together and really being able to market smarter. Because if they read in the media space, they read your magazine, but then what about their newsletter? Do you know that that's the same person or attending your event? You can market a lot smarter if you know that they're attending an event on a specific topic. That's what they're interested in.
Well, you also find out who's really interested in what you have. If they're attending an event, or they're answering sales, or they're doing marketing, you're right. And I agree. I'm surprised how many companies I come across where they still have those separated departments.
Very much.
And they don't talk to each other, which, when sales doesn't talk to marketing, I don't even know, it's so much wasted money. And even when I work with company, because you and I both work kind of as a third party, as an agency.
Right.
But if the client isn't forthcoming with information, or what else they're doing in their other departments, or telling us what's happening on the back end, there's going to be some missing information there that's going to hurt their success, really.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's even harder now with everybody working, so many firms working remotely, to have even the conversation of where the data is, because it might be on someone's literal hard drive and nobody else might know.
Yeah.
So it's, and some people, it's not even that they don't want to share it. It's their data. It's not really their data. It's the company's data. So
yeah. I work with several business auction clients, and the salesmen are very protective of their data and their contacts, and
which I get.
Yeah, I get it. Yep. Yep. I understand it. I wish they would at least give us some details in regards to titles or industries, or if you don't want to tell me it's Tom Jones, at least let me have all the other details about them. And then I can see if there is a connection. But the flip side, I think sometimes when you talk to sales, they may not want to give up their information, but when they do, I think will only increase their sales,
Oh, absolutely. I think part of it is educating them, and you have to have it from the top down, the buy-in for why they need to share their data. If you don't have it from the top level, it's not going to happen. if you need to have that advocate cheerleading for why the data should be together. But it's a process of explaining to people and teaching them why things are important, as well as getting on a decent platform where they can do their marketing, source it, tie into perhaps the sales aspect of it. So it's, every day is interesting.
Yes, yes, it is. And like I mentioned, I was talking to a client the other day and he says, oh, I get most of my leads, I just use LinkedIn. And I'm like, no, you need to have your own database. And I said, well, don't you get the people that come in and register, if he's an auction company, register for the auction or buy? He goes, well, I have those lists, but we haven't done anything with them. And I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. Because that's such valuable information that you should be utilizing.
I think some people, because I'm seeing this a similar thing with a firm, that I think some of the LinkedIn marketing or Facebook marketing is, quote, sexier. So they think it's sexier than using the existing data that they have and their existing customers and prospects that they have. But financially, in the long run, it makes more sense to build and nurture the customers that you have, as well as supplement it with the other things. But to always be going after new customers, I mean, I'm thinking on the subscriber because most of my clients are media, but the cost is so much more to the cost per customer for acquisitions than it is to keep reselling to the same customer if they are a buyer and if they are engaged.
Right. Well, and also with LinkedIn, you don't know when they're going to change their logarithms or how they handle their data. And that's why you have to have something that is yours. And I agree with you, but I think, send out those emails to your house list or your database and supplement it with LinkedIn.
Right. I think it should be supplement, not the sole thing.
Right.
I can't imagine magazines that have 50,000 subscribers trying to replace 50,000 subscribers every year when the universes aren't that big. It's so much more cost effective and time effective to renew people than it is to acquire new people.
Well, especially with the magazines, I think you handle, you're not talking about, I don't know, what's a big, like just plain CEO magazine. You might be dealing with, a magazine that I work with, Heat Treat Today. It's a very specific niche.
But even a magazine going to CEOs, the universe is always so big, only so big. And everybody's trying to reach the CEO for every product, so many products. So if you have somebody who already knows your product, why wouldn't you be marketing to them? Whether it's a magazine or something that you're auctioning off or whatever it is, the repeat customer is the way, the more cost-effective way to start. You always have to supplement. You always have to get new people, but.
Well, that brings me to my next question. I was going to ask you, you obviously do a lot of audience development.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel are your best tactics for audience development?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I kind of think that it depends. Like, there's no set formula for what to do because every vertical market is different. Every target within that vertical market is different. And some, especially within the last year, within COVID, like, hospitality has been decimated. Yes. Pharma and space has been doing very well for, some, pharma just, it's in the news every day with all the drug development. So I think some of the tactics that are working now is kind of what I mentioned before. We are doing some telemarketing because it does really work, especially because as people are not in their offices, they are getting their phone calls. They've transferred their phone, they've transferred their email, right? Okay. So they may not get direct mail right now, but they are getting those, they are getting the emails. So to be targeting smarter on the email side, I think is definitely working. Even on the print side, I have several people we've started to ask, even on the B2B brands, if it's home or business address, which really wasn't important until last year for a lot of people, but it's becoming more important and people are giving that. We're doing that both through distribution on our telemarketing forums, on our email forums, even doing pop-ups on some websites, asking people, times are changed. Where do you want to receive it? Making sure we're trying to reach them and reach the customer because they're still the most important.
Yes. Yes. So now when you do telemarketing, are you doing that when you're going after new prospects, or is that just to keep your current subscribers engaged in subscribing to the publication?
Oh, it's both. It's
Both.
both. Yeah. I don't usually start with the telemarketing. Email is still more cost effective, but telemarketing is still a great way to get a hold of people.
And
So,
people answer the calls?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
There was
Interesting.
definitely a break last summer, but I would say starting in the fall it had pretty good success. It depends on your industry,
Right. Right.
but there are people that that they transfer their phone lines, so you can reach them that way. But the email, I think, especially as more people have been doing webinars in the last year,
Yeah.
trying to capitalize on webinar attendees, as well as get more webinar attendees, I think is important. Consolidating the forms on the webinar so that you're also either asking people the right questions of if they want to subscribe to a magazine or if they want more information or collecting right demographics. All those things have become so much more important in the last year since COVID. It's
Yeah.
kind of crazy. Webinars, I think, are, well, at least for this year, they're going to stay. So
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people. Obviously, webinar attendance is up. I heard from one
yep.
company, they said, "Oh, we used to get like a handful, like maybe 20, and the last time I think they had 260,
Well,
people sign up."
yeah, people want information. People want to connect with people, and you can't travel, so people are going on the webinars to get things. They're listening to podcasts. They're doing things like that just to stay engaged with other people outside of their little, home office space.
Right.
Or if they're working, I mean, if they're in the medical field or retail and they're in the field, just trying to stay on top of things that are changing rapidly.
Right, right. Well, and I agree with you. I don't think it's going to disappear.
No.
Even when things loosen up, I think you're going to see a lot of hybrid type
Mhm.
events.
Yeah.
They're going to have, you can come in person or you can do it virtually, because we all have realized sometimes it's a cost savings. It's a time saver. If you don't have to travel, like you and I, we do a lot of international. If we don't have to fly over to the UK to go to a specific
Right.
event, I think, sometimes you and I will seize that opportunity.
I absolutely will when I can.
I love
But not
still
yet.
meeting people in person. I love doing this. I love talking to people just about marketing, someone like yourself. But it would be fun if we could meet in person sometime
I
soon.
know.
So,
I know.
so I think you will see that. So now when you do your direct mail pieces, I know we were talking about it. Do you find a certain direct mail piece to work better than others? Are you sending a regular letter? Are you
To
sending?
be honest, other than some paid renewals, I'm not really doing any direct mail right now. We
Okay.
are in a couple industries where we know people are in the office doing some tip covers on the magazines, the hard covers to get people to renew that still work, but they also try and drive people to the web. I'm not doing that in all markets. I'm not really doing very much direct mail, although I've been starting to see in my own personal mailbox, definitely there is a increase in direct mail catalogs and direct mail from a year ago, and even from maybe 2 years ago. So people are finding new ways to reach people using the mail. I just don't happen to be doing it right now. I think part of it is because we have a lot of uh, business addresses on the file.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly where we are, both with our clients, but also internally. We would do a lot of direct mail. But because we're on the B2B side, we've had to go through and try to find personal addresses, but also ask them, is it okay? Because I don't want them to think I'm a stalker pushing them and have them receive my, promotion piece at their home.
Right. One thing I will say on the front that you just talked about is we've tried a couple sources to, whether it's append email addresses or tried to append some home addresses, is make sure you look at the data and look at what you're getting back before you use it, because some of it is not good and some of it actually is okay. On the email side, we found in some of the demographics it's been okay, but some of it trying to append mailing information, we could one look at it, I'm like, this isn't good data. So it's not just assuming that it's correct, I think.
Yes. I think I have a quick story. I think back in the 90s, I was getting an international list for a client, and it came in because sometimes you could go over the labels that they sent in.
Right.
Well, these aren't accurate addresses. I could just tell. And I called up the vendor and I said, this isn't correct. And they said, well, we only had 35 fields. That's all we could use. And I'm like, well, 35 characters. And I said, well, international addresses, you can't do that because some of them are quite long.
Long.
Sometimes it's like around the building from here, and you have to have that. Otherwise it won't be delivered. So it was funny that they took it on themselves just to cut the address off. And they're like, it's fine.
Just assume that that's okay.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And I said to him, I go, no, it's not. And he couldn't understand what I was saying. And finally I said, it would be like going to a restaurant and asking for a steak, but then it comes and all they give you is the plate with the steak knife, And still, I don't know if he got my analogy, but I was trying to come down to his level to explain, you can't give me garbage data. It's way too expensive, especially on the international side.
Well, and speaking about the international, one thing we haven't touched on is we talked about direct mail, but I think the privacy is definitely on the email side, both domestic and international, but it's becoming more important domestic. I mean, it's important, but it's becoming legally more important. We have obviously GDPR overseas, and then the UK, now that they're going to not be part of the GDPR, they have their own kind of similar one. Castle in the Canada. So there's a lot of privacy rules with emailing, and California, Nevada's doing one. I'm surprised how many people still don't know about these laws and the opt-in restrictions on some of those things. I think having that, if you're buying international list email, super important, because you really can't buy an international email list and market to that unless it's like under their cover, under their name, or they send it out on your behalf. So
yes. Yeah. Well, I get clients all the time saying, we want to buy a list. And I'm like, no, I would not buy a list. And they're like, why not? I have this great list. It's going to cost me $500. And I'm like,
that's the reason.
Well, one, have they opted in? Are they GDPR compliant? And then I explained to them, you could get blacklisted, but you can also get hit with a really large penalty.
Right.
And, they don't get this, especially like going back to the salesman. They might get a hold of a list and then they can just throw those 500 people into their list, their database. Yeah. And it's like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
So, and I think we all get those emails every day that come over and say, what are you looking for? Are you looking for this title, this title, this title? And then it drops down and says, what about this industry? And they have all the industries. And right there, that's a red flag for me. If you have too many options, and you're willing to sell it, that should be red flags for a lot of companies not to use that.
Well, and I get the same email from different people with the most generic names with the same companies, and that those are bogus, and salespeople will send it to me. I'm like, not even touching it. I've researched the company once. I'm not gonna do it. So I think it's just being really careful on how you build your database, especially if both domestic and internationally, but legally with the international. But I think it's also taking into account some of those privacy things now if you're building an email database, because the United States will eventually get there. And I think everything's been slowed down from COVID. I think it would have been even more in the forefront if, our world hadn't changed in the last 12 months.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it is amazing to me how people don't realize they need to watch that. One of the things I saw is sometimes when a conference is coming up, I'll get a list like, do you want these attendees to the list, to the conference? And I'll know some of the conference organizers, and I'm like, you guys are selling your list before the show? And they're like, Donna, of course not. And I know the answer is no. That's such a valuable asset to them.
Yeah.
But these people are harvesting the data and then pushing it out under those companies' names.
Right. Well, and a lot of it's fake. It's not even the real attendees if you look at look at some of them. Yeah.
It's not, because they're harvesting it. So all they're doing is really looking at who should attend, and then they go out and they try to build a list together.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, they haven't asked those people if it's okay to receive third-party messages and are they opted in?
Right.
And I think one of them, I forgot what publisher and association went after them and they caught them and they finally got hit with a large fine. But I think you and I, we see a lot of that nowadays, you know.
Yeah, you have to make sure your list sources are reputable if you're getting outside lists, whether it's for whatever it's for, whether it's telemarketing, direct mail, um, email. You have to make sure the source is reputable.
And so what do you do when a client comes to you and says they want to buy a list?
I usually explain to them, well, it depends on the list. I mean, if it looks, I mean, sometimes they know things in their industry that I don't know about that
Yeah.
may be available through the company and not through a list broker. So I
Mhm.
might have to research it, but there's a lot of times when it's those, frankly, spam email lists that I just explain I'm not going to use them because of, this is what I know about this company, or this is why we can't use it. It's education. It's still educating people.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you and I were talking about the value we bring to a company right now, just like knowing like Telephony Magazine was out there at one point, Intertech published it, then I believe it was sold, correct?
I don't know, because
Okay.
a lot of those folded into each other,
Right.
as the world has changed. So
But I think sometimes that knowledge of us, we know specific sources, maybe they got purchased or like you said, got merged into one another, but they're out there. So it's good having that.
right.
So now when you sit down with your audience development clients, what do you set as your goal? Like, are you concerned about branding? Is it just to get new subscribers?
I think it really depends on what their goals are. It's trying to find out what their goals are and getting them to articulate what their goals are, because sometimes, a lot of times, they'll have an initial conversation, but that's not really the goal that they want. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So once we start to get into the process, we learn a little bit more about what it is. So it feels like on the audience, I mean, there's people that I'm working on that we are building databases, we are combining and cleaning up databases, but on the audience marketing side, I feel like what a lot of people want right now are they want names to email to. They want leads for advertisers. They want people they can market their webinars and their other products to, their newsletters to. So I feel like that is kind of been important, and it's becoming more important, and it's challenging to get those names because you need,
Yes.
the quantity, it doesn't matter anymore. It's the quality of the names, how engaged are they? And it's not easy to find new names of people who will be engaged in your product unless, you have to try a lot of different tactics.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing with the publishers because they want to keep their quantity up so that they can tell advertisers, right?
Right.
But they definitely should concentrate on the quality so that they have good subscribers that are interested in the
Yeah.
publication.
Yeah. I think some of it too is us in marketing educating them, and they almost have to educate. This is why educate their clients is we're not sending out 20,000 anymore of this newsletter, but we're sending out 10,000, but our open rate has gone up and our engagement rate has gone up. So I think it's slowly getting out there, but it's changing the mindset of people who've been around for a while of what's important and how they're going to get the most, how they're going to make their marketing more effective.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
working with a company and they're strong in 3 industries. And I said, well, let's segment it out and send them messaging that resonates specifically with that
Right.
aerospace industry versus the medical industry, because I feel the more your message answers, questions they have in their specific industry, you'll get a better response.
Right. Right.
So that's very interesting. So where do you see audience development? Now, publishers have had a very tricky time. Back from when we were
Right.
dealing with publishers, there were a ton. Of course, then they were all print. Then some went digital and print. Some folded because it was hard to find subscribers. Where do you see that whole industry going for the future, like 2021 and beyond?
Well, I think, I mean, how long have we been hearing print is dead? Since before I was in this industry, and it's not dead in all the industries.
Yeah.
There might be a better way to message some of those things. I think personally where we're going to go is to more one-to-one marketing, more account-based marketing kind of campaigns, ABM campaigns, where advertisers want to reach a specific type of company and they want so many leads. We're seeing that now, but I think on the B2B side, we're going to continue to see that. We will continue to see people, we were going to see more of people appending information like we talked about, but I think it's going to go the next step. I think they're going to be more appending interests and some of those consumer type information. Services like Bombora and ZoomInfo, where you can get lookalikes, I think they're semi-valuable, but I do think that people are going to use them more as it's, trying to find people who have attributes like someone, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, but I definitely think that that is going to stay important. And I think having names to email to and getting the permissioning up is still going to stay important.
So do you feel email is going to be the channel you use the most, or?
Well, I think email is where you can grab that low-lying fruit. That's where you can grab the people who are interested. I don't think telemarketing is going to go away. I think for some things, for high end, you might have to be mailing them, but it's finding that correct information and the addressing to do it. So, people are, and I think social marketing on the B2B side, I'm definitely have seen that growing on LinkedIn, on Facebook as part of your marketing campaign, not what you were talking about where it's your whole campaign,
Right.
But definitely seeing it as supplemental marketing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think your marketing campaigns have to be across several different channels. And when
Right.
you use the social in there, it can also complement. I do stress to clients, don't do those generic replies where you're pushing your product. Like once you get connected, all of a sudden you get this long thing saying, oh, this is what I do. Here's a case study. Let's sign up for time to talk. And it's just the same message that they're sending out to several different people. I think it has to be, like you said, more of a one-on-one communication with the people.
Building it. Sorry, cut you off. Building the relationship, nurturing those leads, as well as on a lot of the platforms where you can set up the automated marketing journeys. Definitely think that you could go crazy with some of those, but somebody signs up, give them a welcome series. Tell them slowly, like what you're saying. You can do that, a lot of that automated now. You don't have to have someone sending out that personal message all the time. I think that's going to be the growth for the next couple of years if you're on a platform that can do it.
Yeah.
I think to start, you need to figure out what data you need, what data is helpful for you about a customer, what information is customer, what do you need to start with, and then how can you build on that? And don't think about what do you need now, what are you thinking of doing in the next 2 to 3 years, which is really hard to plan that far right now, but you have to.
Yes.
What kind of demographics are important, what kind of permissioning is important, start getting it right away.
Yeah. You have to have those goals set out there. Otherwise, what are we all heading towards? And I agree.
Right.
It can't just be the goals this year. And like you said, it's going to be hard to really set goals 3
It's really hard right now.
Who knows? Because who would have thought all this would have happened last March? No one would have ever imagined this could possibly happen. So it's important to have those goals. So it's just, I'm trying to think in my head. I'm thinking about goals and my head's starting to swim just thinking about it.
It is. It's hard because we're just trying. I mean, we're also trying to deal with so much, whether it's, our kids working at home or our families, and trying to stay smart and safe and to try and plan ahead can be challenging. Sometimes it's like all you can do is get through the day, and that's okay. But sometimes it's better, I don't know, if you have the time to not focus on the task. I'm always like, looking down, but to look up and look at that bigger picture, you need that step away sometimes.
Yes, you do. And I think I had a interview with, I think it was one of our first episodes here of the World Innovators podcast. And I was talking to someone who's both on the B2C and the B2B space. And we were talking about how there used to be a really set line between the two sectors. And that has started to merge because I don't know if you felt like this when we first started. I never talked about my husband. I never talked about when my children were being born. You know, my clients had no clue when I was having my children. I would talk to one of them that day. Luckily, I had both my children outside work hours, and then I talked to them the next day.
Right.
No, because it was
It's
like,
also because we're women.
well, yeah, because
Frankly, that's part of it.
It was not a sign of weakness, but it just showed I was going to have another distraction in my work day, and they didn't feel they were going to get 100% from me. And so I never divulged personal information, and that you have seen drastically change.
Yeah.
Come last March.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, you know, as when I asked you about your backdrop there and how it was a special item of your parents, you know, I'm seeing that now. You know, you're being right into people's homes.
Right into your houses.
Yeah, you're right here. You're right in like the world innovators hubs. But you know, like kids, like there's a commercial on TV where the little boy keeps like getting his head around his mother, and the mother keeps holding up a coffee cup to cover him up. But you know, that's kind of changed. And I think our messaging, because like you were saying, you need to have more information about the individual, not just the title and the industry, but maybe something else. Is she a mom with kids? Is she, you know, an avid, like I love to ski. Does she like to ski? Because then when you're able to send them messaging that, and I've used the words before, resonates, but I could use, I'm reading a book, Fanocracy, right now. If you create that group of fans that are all in the same space that like similar things, you know, it becomes a community and you can build those relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when you build those relationships, I feel you're going to get customers, very loyal customers for years to come.
Right.
And so that's always a good way. Well, I don't want to hold you all day. You and I could talk about marketing
for a long time.
Forever. But one of the things I always say is I feel we have to energize ourselves in order to be innovative at work. And so my last and final question for you is, what do you do to energize yourself?
This is a topic I could talk about all day. I'll be totally honest. I split it into two parts. One is in work and one is outside of work. So at work, it's hard. I've worked at home for over 20 years, but I wasn't working at home all the time. You know, you'd be with clients. I'm the person in a meeting that's walking around the room. To be sitting on, you know, talking to Zoom all the time is really different for me. But if I need to be energized, I leave my desk. I will go and walk my dog. I will throw the ball to her in the yard at lunch just to get away. I will find different spaces in my house I can work at. Sometimes you just need to shut the computer because it'll suck you in to do that. And I try and limit. I feel like this month it's been a little challenge. A couple of months it's challenging, but try and put boundaries up, especially for someone who's used to working at home. Boy, it's easy to work all the time, you know, to every night work. So I try and limit my working hours. I try and take a break every, you know, hour or two, which you can't if you have meeting after meeting, but just to walk away. Outside of work, I do a lot of different things. I love it. Well, when it's nice out, we do a lot of biking. We built a little bit of a gym in our house, but we do biking, and I do a lot of yoga. I have been trying to write. I read a ton, always trying to educate myself on whether it's real world issues. I've been reading a lot about actually race and our country and things like that in the last year, but reading a lot of fiction too. And I do a lot of photography on the side, and I found that I was not pulling my camera out, and so this year, I don't usually set a New Year's resolution, but it was to pull out the big DSLR at least once a month, do a photo shoot of something, and I have to post it online because then I'm accountable for it. So so I did January and February. So in March, I'll do this weekend. So that's kind of, I think it's just getting out of my space, talking to friends, couple neighbors, playing cards. I do some puzzles. I find it very meditative. So try and do a lot of different things. I get bored easily, so having a variety of things is good for me. Maybe that's why I'm a good consultant, is because I work with a variety of different people on different projects.
Right. Well, that is a great thing about our jobs is we're working in totally different industries every day, every hour. Who knows,
Oh my gosh, every
you're
day is
talking
different.
pharma and then, or maybe it be heat treat, or now it's food. The food ones
Right.
always kill me. When I end up working on a food deal right around lunchtime, I'm always like, but I'm with you. And then I just posted something, or really I commented on someone on LinkedIn because they're talking about what do you do during work to energize yourself. And one thing I forget a lot is to just smile, because I get so
Yeah.
involved in my work. And of course, it
Yeah.
just, and I just have to smile, even if it's for no reason, just to, perk yourself up and get going. So,
It's so true. And I think you have to stay connected and not just the meetings. You have to, like, us talking the other day, it's been a while since we've talked. It was lovely just to spend a half an hour just catching up with you with your life and what's going on. You realize you're not alone. I think
yes,
that's really, really helpful,
yes, it
and
is,
give yourself a
especially
break.
right. Especially when it comes even to our work, marketing is changing so fast.
Yeah.
But like you said, the traditional sides of things still need to be implemented, but you do have to stay educated in the new thing. So I feel like we're constantly educating
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
Excellent. All right. I don't want to hold you, but I want to thank you so much for joining
Thanks
me
for having
today.
me.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your little bit of winter we have left. Spring is on the
Spring
horizon.
is hopefully coming soon. Get
All
out
right.
and do
I
some
will talk
hiking.
to you soon.
I will talk to you soon. Thanks, Donna.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the World Innovators Podcast. For more information about today's topic, email us at dpeterson@worldinnovators.com or call 860-210-8088. And please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode.